So first I'd like to introduce Teresa Gonzalez, and she is the Program Director of Gateway for International Education at the Chang School for Ryerson University. She was a teacher, principal, superintendent of education, director of various ministries of education departments, and has won the highest federal award for her work in equity and community engagement. Teresa has spent the last 10 years in development and humanitarian work in over 22 countries in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. She's passionate about youth and access to learning and inclusion. Welcome, Teresa. Thank you.
Let me start by thanking you for inviting me to be here with you today, and by sharing maybe 3 secrets with you. The first one is I used to do a lot of public speaking and stopped because I have something called spasmodic dysphonia. And talk about social innovation. Spasmodic dysphonia is when your vocal cords don't receive the messages from your brain. So I get Botox shots. Not on my wrinkles, but on my vocal cords every 2 months. I'm always trying to convince the doctor to add a little bit here and a little bit here, but she doesn't. The second one is that Peter Monkhouse will have to write a check addressed to Teresa Gonzalez, because a few months ago he said, "Would you do me a favor? Would you sit on a panel?" And I'm running somewhere, and I said, yes. And Christopher called me and started to talk about today, and I totally panicked. I thought, what do I know about social innovation? But I'm thrilled to be here anyway. And last but not least, let me tell you that I came here from Mexico City in 1975. And I started teaching in Flemington Park. And I was with a group of immigrant children who did not know how to ski. And we went on a ski trip. And it was a little hill about this size, but I thought it was a mountain. And the little kids would say, "You go first, Miss Gonzalez." And I'd say, no, you go first. "No, Miss Gonzalez, you go first." I didn't know how to ski. Put my skis on. I did go down the hill, but not on my skis. I went down the hill, you know how. And I thought somebody should develop some padding for those new immigrants who come here and we do not know how to ski. But as you saw them up in the hill, they all went, "Hey, there goes Speedy Gonzalez." So I will never forget my welcome to Canada. Let me address the word social innovation. All of you have looked it up. I actually was dazzled by how many definitions there were. And it all depended on who you are and what people were doing in the terms of how they defined it. And I thought maybe if we define the word, we're simply going to cage it and make it a static work or confine it. So I thought, no, I'm not going to define it. I'm going to ramble on a little bit this morning and ask you to bear with me. I think in many ways, social innovation is about embracing paradox, because living is about life posts. We always play between 2 goalposts. And one of those plays that we engage in is courage and fear, passivity and action, birth and death. And I think that social innovation is actually born in contradictory spaces, in spaces of conflict, in spaces of need, and in spaces of desperation. I think social innovation actually is born in spaces of divide. As a good Latin American, I want to suggest something. I want to suggest that social innovation is about passion, like we heard this morning in the poem that was recited. Because passion is power, and passion is what we are most curious about, most hungry for. I always hunger for passion, and I know that when that dies within me, I will lose my inspiration, and I will not be able to innovate. So to me, whether you are a business person, a part of an NGO, or part of government, if you're not passionate, I don't believe that you can be a social innovator. I do not want to equate social innovation with brains and money. I also don't want to see it as a way to save the world, to save others, to be efficient, to be effective, or as a way to substitute and cut costs. I don't want to see it as an idea that is selected by a competition. I want to see it as a way to foster a shared commitment towards one common purpose. It's about daydreaming, not night dreaming. It's about cultivating awareness of our realities. It's a process of reflection and imagination. And it's a mastery that regardless of our color, our gender, our religion, or our status, we actually have support to create and sustain an idea that will support and encourage all of us here to engage in collective thinking and in dialogue, so that you and I can actually establish together new environments and a new way to enhance social and human capital. And you and I can actually engage in developing awareness of how complex life is and how interdependent we are, and how, my goodness, everything changes by the second. Now that I have tried in some elusive way to capture the so-called word social innovation, I want to confront some issues and questions. It isn't a quick fix. In many ways, actually, social innovation is a luxury. Tell me something. Who has the time in this day and age to get their ideas recognized, acknowledged, researched, tested, paid for, and accepted? Who truly values people who think, who create? Who gives them time to water their ideas and to root their ideas like trees? Who respects innovation? And who determines what innovation should impact and what change should it make? How many of us get encouraged in our workplace to sit down and actually reflect and think, when we're usually encouraged to take workshops on time management? That we need 3 R's for social innovation. The first one is to reflect, to ponder, to dialogue, and to do it with some hope and hopefully with some humility. We need to ask ourselves, how does innovation impact on others? Let me share with you my humanitarian work. I worked with often communities surrounded by mining companies, where many Canadian businesses have interest in mining. In fact, all of us have a BlackBerry here, a computer, a cell phone. And yet the ingredients that make these wonderful innovations are mostly found in the Congo, a place that rapes the earth, rapes children, rapes young women, creates poverty, has armed conflict. And we develop social amnesia as we sit every day texting each other, not realizing that every minute we text, somebody's dying, somebody's hungry, somebody's killing each other. So I ask myself, and I ask you, to please reflect as you engage in social innovation. And the next R is to reframe. How do you take those ideas in order to fulfill what we need, both in our businesses, in our NGOs, etc., and also to fulfill sometimes a greed that we have and a need to have choice without hurting and destroying others? And last but not least, the last R, resilience. And by that I mean when you stretch and bend and shift an idea, how do you combine it with empathy and accountability? Empathy and accountability. Do those words, and can they ever come together? How do we build strong relationships with each other and respect each other? Let me end with an example, because the last 10 years I've been doing humanitarian and development work. One of the things I want to look at is that all of us in some way are involved in humanitarian and development work, because we either wear the clothing that people strive to put together for us or grow in the fields where it's hot and awful, or we have interest in nonprofit organizations, or we came here as immigrants from countries that we needed to leave. But I want to ask you one question, and this is an important question, because aid in so many ways has been an unmitigated political, economic, and humanitarian disaster. And I always wonder, if I got the phone and I called people in Africa and Latin America, Thailand, Pakistan, and said, the next 5 years I'm canceling all funding, and I will only give you funds for social innovation, to invest in yourselves, in your ideas, and in your own needs, what would happen? Damnisha Moya is an African economist, a woman who's a social innovator who asked that question. She's controversial, but she has no fears, because I think it's an interesting question. What would happen if we actually gave that money to the people within their own countries to build? And people will say, well, there will be corrupt. Well, corruption exists everywhere anyway. You might as well be corrupt and take care of your own destiny without somebody else taking care of it for you. She challenges us today as bystanders to not simply talk social innovation, but to invite everyone that it's going to affect to create their own destiny and to decipher and understand what they're engaging in. Because one of the questions I always have is, what is social innovation and social responsibility? And how do we measure the impact in terms of outputs in what we do? So I go back to passion and to action. And I keep saying, expect nothing. Be prepared for everything. Be curious. Nurture each other. Be an incubator. And collectively engage in social innovation. But don't engage in it as a way to look at the world and look at tigers and rhinos that are slaughtered, at entire people that are moved from their ancestral homes to mine, at seas that are being poisoned, or immigrant professionals who come with a dream to Canada but cannot get a job because we focus on their accent or their color. Because social innovation is about ordinary people like you and I, who believe in each other, who believe in our ideas, and who will do everything we can to root those ideas in contradictory spaces. Maybe social innovation is simply about embracing questions. We're not a culture that tolerates questions. I remember in schools, any kid who put up their hands, you quite quickly went to them and said, okay, what's your question? But with an almost reprimand in some ways. Or people look at you saying, hurry up and get it over with. What do you want to say? So let's embrace that question and let's sit with it. And let me end by sharing a proverb with you. There's my Latin American accent. And it comes from Africa. And it says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And you young men have planted an incredible tree. Thank you.